On to the event. Today is day 5,159. The Boswell Book Company's been here and been in business. Thank you very much. And we're really thrilled to have this event. Let me introduce first our conversationalist for the evening, Erica Ruth Neubauer, author of course, the Jane Wonderly investigations. Began with murder at the Mean House, and then there was a murder at Budgefield Manor. Then there was more murder and danger on the Atlantic, and recently there has been intrigue and perhaps more murder in Istanbul. She will be conversationalizing with none other than Colleen Cambridge. So glad to have you here. New York Times, USA Today bestselling author of the American in Paris series, as well as the Philadelphia Bright Mysteries, an Agatha Award finalist, and she is the mastermind as well of books written under the pen names CM and Colleen Gleason. She is here tonight celebrating the 60th anniversary year of Julia Child's TV show, The French Chef. And she is celebrating that with her charming new Parisian historical mystery, Mastering the Art of French Murder. Please give them both a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Colleen. Aha, there it is.
Is this thing on? Okay.
There it is.
My husband's a sound engineer. He'd be actually, he's probably in here wincing somewhere.
There. Welcome.
Thank you. I've heard so many things about Boswell, and everything I've heard doesn't even pale in comparison with the brief glimpse I saw of the store as I came running in 3 minutes late.
It's my favorite. So let's kick it right off. Can you give us a brief elevator pitch for this book?
Tabitha Knight is a former Rosie the Riveter who worked at the Willow Run bomber plant just outside of Detroit. The war is over and she is kind of at loose ends, breaks off her engagement with her college and high school sweetheart. And her grandfather lives in Paris. Her mother is French. Her grandmother and mother had raised her with her father in near Detroit, and her grandfather lives in Paris. So Tabitha's kind of at loose ends. She's not able to do men's work anymore now that the war is over. So she has the opportunity to visit her grandfather, who lives in Paris, with his friend Uncle Rafe. And so she goes to visit, and she starts going to the market every day, and she meets this woman whose name is Julia Child, who happens to live across the street from her. Now, the fabulous thing about this is that Julia is a good cook, and she's learning how to cook even more. She's at the Cordon Bleu. Tabitha does not know how to cook, and her grandfather and Uncle Rafe are really getting tired of canned spaghetti sauce and the things that Tabitha grew up eating back home. But Tabitha speaks French, and she also has a penchant for fixing things. So she and Julia get to be friends because Julia is learning French. Julia starts teaching her how to cook. One day they go to the market, and they're chatting, and they come back to Julia's apartment building where she lives with her husband, Paul, and her sister, Dort, is living with her at that time. And they discover that there has been a dead body found in the cellar of Julia Child's apartment building. Not only that, but there's a bloody chef's knife that just happens to belong to Julia on the floor next to it. Spoiler alert, Julia Child did not murder anybody. So that's the setup.
It would be a short series if she had.
It would, and not only that, I'd be sued from here to the next year by the Julia Child Foundation.
Yeah, you would. So I have so many questions about writing a real life person, but how did this series come into being?
Oh, what a story. I have to go back a little ways to tell this story. And it may seem like I'm not going to answer the question, but I really will get to it. Many years ago, I wrote what I called the book of my heart. And I'm sure you've maybe Wonderly, the first Wonderly book was your book of your heart, but it was a kind of a gritty, moody murder mystery set in Paris in 1900. And it featured a gay homicide detective. And then the other main character was Paris's most famous fictional courtesan at the time. So I wrote this book. Nobody wanted to publish it. I'd been writing for years. I'd written a bunch of other books, but nobody wanted to publish it. But one of the editors at Kensington, where I write now, said to my agent, well, we like what Colleen's doing, but just not this book. Would she be interested in writing a historical mystery series featuring or starring Abraham Lincoln solving mysteries in Washington, D.C.? Well, I don't know if you're laughing at the idea because it's great or because it's not great, but I'll tell you what my reaction was when my agent was very excited. And I was like, isn't he a little busy hunting vampires? Aha. Okay. Anyway, I mean, no, but seriously, isn't he a little busy running a country that's at war? He's got family issues. There's a lot going on. I don't think Abraham Lincoln's got time to solve mysteries. So I said, well, what about if it was like a friend of his? So Abe Lincoln is the mentor. He's the sidekick, if you can have the president of the United States be a sidekick. And fortunately, the editor liked that idea. So I wrote 3 books in that series under the name C.M. Gleason, the first book being Murder in the Lincoln White House. Unfortunately, as happens sometimes with creative endeavors, the books didn't do as well as we had all hoped. But instead of Kensington saying bye-bye, my editor suggested that I might consider writing a murder mystery series with Agatha Christie's housekeeper solving mysteries. And I loved that idea, jumped on that with 2 feet and wrote the Phillida Bright mystery series. So I was probably working on the 2nd book in that series, Agatha Christie's housekeeper solving mysteries in 1930s Devon, England, when my editor called me one day and said, we got a great idea. We want to know if you'd be interested in writing Julia Child solving mysteries in Paris in 1950s. And my reaction was similar to the one with the Lincoln thing. I'm like, okay, but she's going to school and she's a real person. I don't really love the idea of writing a series with the main character being a real person. You're just so limited in what you can do. So she said, no, we really want Julia Child solving mysteries. I'm like, okay. So I write a proposal for it, send them the proposal. They love the proposal. And then their legal department said, you probably don't want to do that with Julia Child being the main character, which I had suggested maybe we do a side character. So I ended up writing Tabitha Knight as Julia Child's close friend in Paris. And so I got the best of both worlds, in my opinion. I got to do the fun stuff, get the Julia Child and the Paris and the foodie element, but I didn't have to be restricted by her life as the main character. But the fun thing going full circle is that very first book that I wrote, the Book of My Heart. Well, it wasn't the first book I wrote, but the Book of My Heart that launched this, that character makes an off-page appearance in this book. So I kind of came full circle. It was kind of fun.
So I have a lot of questions. Like, how much research on Julia Child herself did you do, and how close did you try to stay to who she really was as a person?
Well, the thing is, very close. You know, the short answer is very, very close, because you all can go and watch her on TV. So you can say, you know, you can tell whether I kind of get her right. So that is one of the fun things, but it's also one of the scary things about writing about a real person, as you can imagine, is, you know, if you screw it up, you're going to hear from people. And there's proof of who she is. Like, we don't really have proof of what Abraham Lincoln was really like, what he sounded like, how he acted and moved and stuff. We do about Julia. So when it came to the research, I did the same sort of thing with Julia as I did with Agatha Christie, who appears in my books, and Abraham Lincoln, is I researched their lives just very closely. I mean, I researched a little bit before, but very closely the time period that I'm writing the books. I don't really go past that time period because I don't want to get mixed up, confused. I don't want to foreshadow something that, you know, is going to happen later. So I researched pretty closely like that time, like 1949 to 1952-ish, I think it was. She was actually in Paris. And it helps that she has an autobiography, My Life in France, that really, really helps, because I get a lot of details, really great details. Like, I don't know if anybody here has read the book yet, but there's a 2-line note, or, you know, in her autobiography, that she's having trouble with her mayonnaise recipe. And I took that and expanded that into a lot more in this particular book. So, you know, the nice thing is you can take those things, those little details, and try and make them actually part of the story. So I try to be as accurate as I possibly can.
So is that where you got to look? Because I had a question about, like, where did you get some of those really specific and really interesting details about Paris at that time? Like, I had no idea that people didn't necessarily have ice boxes, and they would hang them out the window over the courtyard.
Well, she did. I mean, I can't say for sure that a lot of people did that, but she actually said that they didn't have an ice box. And in her kitchen that I describe in the book is exactly how she describes it in her autobiography. So that was basically, you know, her, and she knows. But here's the funny thing, or the interesting thing. I think I put in this book that she's 6'2", but she always lied about how tall she was. So I was going by what she said in her autobiography, but she was actually 6'3". But I was going by what she said, because I had seen 2 different heights for her And I thought, well, she should know her own height. So I went by what she said, but apparently I found out later she lies about
She's
that.
a liar.
I know, but I got a lot of other details about Paris from other books as besides hers. Stanley Krakow had lived there during that time period after after the liberation. There's quite a few books about Paris during that time, memoirs as well as just nonfiction. So I got some details from those as well.
And do you do a lot of this research before you start writing?
Well, I do enough to be dangerous to start. I'm guessing you probably do the same.
I do.
Yeah, as you go along, you're probably filling in stuff.
I do some research up front just to get an idea of what I want the mystery to be and what I want some of the side characters to be. And then I write the first draft and then I go back and figure, because then I know what I don't know, like
Right.
what details I don't know, what description, like where the places that they're going, then I know what I don't know. And then that's what I have to research.
So, sorry, I got to ask her a question now. So do you know who done it when you start your books?
No.
Oh, good. Me too. Yes. That's the best thing. I'm always so happy to find someone else who doesn't know. Do you ever change who done it?
Yes.
Okay. See, that's how it can be done.
So one of my questions was, are you a pantser or a plotter? And so I'm guessing, and a pantser and a plotter, for anyone who doesn't know, it's something we talk about a lot. A pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants, so they don't know what's happening in their story. And a plotter is somebody who outlines. I am a pantser. I never have any idea what's going to happen next.
Same here. And I actually also say I'm a plodder, not a plotter, because I sometimes plod through because I don't plot. So yeah, I don't know. In fact, I have a book coming out at the end of October, end of September that I changed. I wrote the murder scene 3 times, and it's at the beginning of the book. I wrote it 3 times, changed the victim twice. Not even the killer, but the victim. Okay, so I really don't know what I'm doing half the time.
This
But
makes
that's
me
what's
feel
fun
better.
about it, right?
Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting for the writer too, because then it's sometimes a surprise to me as well.
Well, that's it. I started writing when I ran out of books to read when I was younger. Like I would be one of those kids that would go to the library and get the stack of books. I want to go back the next day. And my mom would be like, you just got those books. So I ran out of books to read, started writing for myself. And that's what I still do. And sounds like you do too, writing for yourself, like reading as you're writing kind of.
Yeah, I'm writing to have fun and
Yeah.
to tell the story. And yeah.
And whatever happens. And it's a surprise to all of us.
Exactly. I'm trying to mentally go through my list of what my questions were. Oh, was there a real life inspiration for Tabitha Knight?
In a way, yes. So I grew up near Willow Run Airport. I grew up within, like I could see the planes landing all the time, very, very close. It was part of my family's history because my grandfather, who couldn't enlist because he had really bad back problems, but was an excellent mechanic. Both of them worked there. And my great aunt Rosie was an actual Rosie the Riveter. So in a sense, I drew that from that family heritage for the character of Tabitha, but also, Tabitha was a lot like, there were many women who were in Tabitha's situation, meaning that they had been able to do some interesting work during the war. They weren't relegated to doing women's jobs. And now that the war was over, they were kind of at loose ends. And Julia Child, although she didn't have that kind of thing, as many of you may know, she worked for the precursor for the CIA, which is really fun. But both Julia and Tabitha are women who are wanting to do something different than maybe what society is expecting. Julia had said, I don't really want to be just a diplomat's wife. I don't mind being a diplomat's wife, but I want to do something else. I want to find my thing. And I think Tabitha's going through that as well. So I was trying to find a person that it would make sense for Julia to be friends with. And that was one of the elements I think that worked for both of them.
Yeah, I think it really works for them. Is there going to be a little bit of romance?
Well,
Colleen?
maybe. Yes. So one of the things, this is not really an answer to your question, but it's just a note. My favorite genre to read and to write is historical mystery, because I grew up reading mysteries. I grew up reading Little House on the Prairie. I always loved the romantic elements. So for me, the marriage of history, a murder mystery that can't be solved with CSI, which I love. Isn't that the best part about writing historical mystery? Yeah. You have to figure it out. Oh my gosh. And a romance or character relationships that arc over a series or a number of books. That to me is the magic combination. So yes, there will be, but I'm not saying with whom.
Fair.
So what is one of the most fun things? I gotta ask you some questions. What is one of the most fun things you have had to decide when you were doing one of your historical mysteries with, the lack of science? Like trying to figure out clues that work with the lack of science that they had then?
See, I love the lack of science. I've tried to write contemporary, and it's really difficult because you can just look everything up on Google.
And people can always call each other on the phone. You can
Right.
find where someone is on the phone.
Yeah. And there's tracking, your phone is tracking, has a tracking device, so you know where somebody was. It's makes it so much more difficult. I like the more gumshoe aspect of the old time investigation. Even though sometimes it feels like they're just walking around talking to people, but I mean, that's what's fun.
That's what's fun. And trying to figure out, the clues that you can have that make sense to them and also don't seem too boring to today's reader. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking most people who read historical mystery get that element. They're not like, oh, I would have figured that out weeks ago, but that's because we know more now than we did then. I don't know if you know this or not, but it wasn't until like 1900 that they could even identify the difference between animal blood and human blood. So there was just so many things that we take for granted now. Not that I'm writing in 1900, 1930s and 1950, but still.
Wow, I
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I was total blank. I don't have a good answer for that. What is a fun thing for you?
Well, with poisons, nowadays you could do a toxicology report. Back then, if somebody gets poisoned, there has to be some reason for the detective to think that there's a poison. Maybe you've heard about, they used to call arsenic the inheritance drug because you could poison someone with arsenic back then for, months. And then nobody would know. Like they might suspect it, but nobody would know. So I used poison in A Trace of Poison, which is the second Philida Bright book that came out almost a year ago. And you have to find a way for the detective, whoever it is, to say, oh, maybe there's something wrong here. So the item that I had poisoned, unfortunately, a cat got into it and died. So that's when they realized this thing was poisoned. So they were able to go, and otherwise they wouldn't know for sure. You know what I mean? So that's one of the fun things. Other fun story is I have a really good friend who's an ER doc. So he does all my medical stuff. I'll text him. I'll be like, hey, Gary, he's been in the business like 35, 40 years. Hey, Gary, I need to kill somebody. He'll immediately respond. Okay, how much blood? How long do you need them to suffer? What time period? Do you want it to be loud?
Yeah, what's Gary's number?
I know, right? He's great. So he's very annoyed with me though, because in Murder at Mallow and Hall, which is the first Philida Bright Agatha Christie book, I had a person found in Agatha Christie's body in Agatha Christie's library, was killed with a fountain pen in the neck. And my friend Gary, to this day, rolls his eyes at that. He's like, Colleen, come on, couldn't you come up with something? That's not realistic. But the truth is, I got the idea from a cop. I was talking to a cop who told me that he had seen somebody die with from a pencil stab to their neck. So I have to just say, Gary, I'm sorry.
It happened.
Right.
In real life.
So I know it could have happened. So
sorry, Gary. Poison is fun. I wrote a Christmas novella where I poisoned someone with mistletoe.
Coming out. Oh, it's so poisonous.
It is. It was also, this was fun for me to learn. It also used to be used, the English variety used to be used in low doses to treat heart conditions.
Like digitalis, right?
A little bit, yeah.
So speaking of digitalis, really big side note, I was in Naples, Florida, where they have, all these restaurants on the main drag, and they have all these huge potted plants surrounding the restaurants, like along the sidewalk. And what's growing in these, literally what was growing in these pots was foxglove, which is a poison. I was talking to a poison expert and I said to her, so, I'm sitting at dinner with my person I want to murder, and I've got this foxglove growing next to me. If he gets up and notice I said if he gets up and goes to the bathroom, how many leaves of foxglove do I have to put in his salad to kill him? And she goes, not that many. On the street in Naples. I was like, whoa. So yeah. She said not that many, and I was like, how many? Oh boy.
How many? And he's just a little sick.
But if I really want to off the guy or the girl or whatever, 5, 10. I just thought that was wild that it's growing right there.
So back to this book.
Sorry. I digress.
Yeah. Back to this book. There was so much food. It was a little like food porn, you guys. It made me so hungry. Did you try any of her cooking?
Yes. Well, first of all, the problem is I don't eat meat, but I do eat a lot of butter. So Julie and I would have gotten along just fine with that. I made her omelets, and I have done many of her, so one of the things I love about her cookbook, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, not murder, cooking, I have to think about that, are a lot of it's technique and just like how to pick a vegetable, how to generally cook a vegetable or, a piece of fish or whatever. And so I've done a lot of that. Like I've made a lot of the sauces, the way she describes them in her book, because it's basically foolproof. That was the whole point of the way why she made that cookbook, was to make it foolproof for American women or men to cook. And so I haven't roasted a chicken, even though I had really fun writing that scene where she was slathering the thing with butter and everything. And then someone had asked me, I think my editor had said to me, well, are we going to put recipes in the back of this book? And I'm like, this is about Julia Child, who wrote this incredible cookbook. I am not going to try and put recipes in this book.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, talk about like really stepping in it. No. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree. That's smart. That was smart.
But you get cooking tips, like how to cook an omelet, how to roast a chicken. In the next book, you're going to learn how to cook mushrooms. So
it really came across where you're talking about how insistent she was about those things, about picking the vegetables correctly and like whatever. That really did come across. Interesting.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, thank you. And that was, I thought, anybody can take that information and use that in general. And that's what I thought was fun about that.
Let's talk about how many books a year you write, and B, how like your process for that. I have a feeling, a sneaking suspicion, that you write an insane amount of books every year.
Not anymore.
Okay.
I mean, I think one year I wrote 5 books in about a 13-month period a long time ago. And my kids were young. I don't even know how I did that. That must be why I have to pay to get my hair colored, because it's very gray now. I do 2 books a year for Kensington. I do the one Fill It a Bright book, and there's one coming now, and I have 2 more contractors, so there'll be 5 total so far. And then I'll be doing one Tabitha and Julia book, and then I do a fun little series on the side when I have time. And it's published by a very, very small publisher, and it's about a mystical, magical bookshop. It's called the 3 Tomes Bookshop series. And that's just like super fun and like just 100% escape. But if you're a book lover, which many of you probably are, it's just like a really super fun thing. So I do like 3 books a year, roughly.
I'm assuming you write quickly.
I write, well, see, here's the thing. I've written 46 full-length novels. So I've been doing it a while. Like my first book came out in 2007. Okay, you guys, like I've been doing it a while, and I wrote 8 books before I sold my first book. So I had been writing for a while. I worked full time, had 3 kids, was married, had 3 kids, would write every night before I went to bed. So I did not watch TV in the 90s. I didn't watch any TV in the evening of the 90s. And then anyway, so I got to the point where I trust my process, which took me a long time to get there. So I trust my process. I trust that I'm just going to be reading as I'm writing, or writing as I'm reading, however you want to look at it. I write usually 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I call Wednesday my free day Wednesday. That's the day I go appointments, meet people for lunch, catch up if I don't write on Monday and Tuesday. I have a minimum number of words I try to write each day in order to hit my deadlines. So as long as I hit those words, then I know I'm going to finish the book on time. But since my process is such that I'm constantly writing and rewriting and working on what I've already written, by the time I finish the book, I'm done. Like I don't do separate drafts. I write and I massage, and I write a little bit more, then I massage, I go back, I fix. I'm constantly working it like a kneading bread dough. And so it's my process. It's not always the greatest. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it's how it works for me. And it's my full-time job. See, I'm fortunate that I do it for full time. So, that's what I do. I don't have to balance another job. My kids are grown and out of the house. So that makes it a little bit easier.
What's the word count you're trying to hit every day?
Usually it's around 2,000.
Okay.
Sometimes if I screw around, it's up to 2,500. Sometimes if I have a really good week, or if I start early, it's down to 1,500. It just depends. And so for me, it's like a little numbers game. It's a numbers game. As long as I'm hitting my numbers, then I know I'm going to finish the book on time. So I don't need to stress about it. And if I'm really behind, I have the weekend or my free day Wednesday to catch up. So that's become like my process.
Are you reading, like, are you doing research for one series? Because they're both historical series.
yeah.
And so there's research for both of them. Are you doing research for one while you're writing the other?
Not usually. I might be thinking about what the next book is going to be about, but I'm not really usually doing research until I finish. Usually when I have time, when I finish one, I usually have a month before I have to start the next one. So during that time, I start to think what I'm going to like more detail and do some pre-research. But like you, I research as I'm going. And as I'm writing along, I'm, doing my 2,000 words a day. If I don't know something, or if I can't think of the right word, I just put 2 X's in there and I just keep going. Otherwise, if I have to stop and look something up, you lose your train of thought and then you're stuck. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up, see what the crowd here has questions. Anyone have questions? Yes, ma'am.
What kind of research do you do to try to keep the vocabulary and the phrasing true to the time and not be anachronistic?
Yeah, I try really, really, really hard to not be anachronistic. And I actually screwed up in this book. I used the word database in 1949. Yeah. I know. I don't even know what I was thinking. Maybe it was Tabitha telling the story and, back anyway. But I try really hard not to do stupid things like that. So what I do is I read fiction set during that time period. So one of the most fun things of writing the Fill It Up Bright books is I get to read as many Agatha Christie novels and short stories as I want. I get to watch the BBC, David Suchet. Oh my gosh, he's my hero. So I try very, very hard. I'm not perfect, but I tried really hard. Like I try not to use the word scan, but I use the word database. I don't know how I did that. I don't know how it just makes me right. Because did we ever use the word scan before the scanning machine? I don't know, but I try not. Did we? I could look it up and find out, but I haven't done that. So I try really hard. I'm very conscious of it, but I do screw up sometimes if I'm in the flow. So hopefully nobody here noticed the database error.
I didn't notice. If it makes you feel better, I once in my second book I used unibrow.
Oh, yeah. Okay. See, we try the best we can. We try the best we can, and sometimes it just you're flowing.
Sometimes someone just has a unibrow.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually don't remember how did I find that out? I don't remember how I found out. So apparently it was illegal for women to wear trousers in Paris until about 1972, technically illegal. It was one of those laws that they didn't really enforce, but you weren't supposed, if you were a woman, you weren't supposed to be wearing trousers unless you were riding a bike or riding a horse. And, Tabitha, she's kind of new to Paris, and I'm not even sure how she knows this. Like, it's kind of an obscure law, but, there's no pictures of Julia Child that I have seen with her in pants. But there were women in the Bohemian area of Paris. Why can I not think of the name of it right now? Thank you. No, well, no, I'm thinking of on the left bank, Saint Germain. I can't. I hear the French in my head, but it doesn't come out right. So just I apologize. But down near the oh my gosh, near the Latin Quarter, where all the Bohemians hung out, you would see women wearing trousers, fairly commonly during that time period, but it wasn't common really elsewhere. And like I said, I never saw any picture of Julia, and Paul took so many pictures of her, never in pants, even like on a picnic, you would see her in her long skirt. So I was kind of checking, did women wear trousers in Paris? And, after the liberation, something like that. And I think that's when that came up, that it was technically illegal. And so she's like, well, I'm riding my bike. I think it's fine for me to wear trousers. So
have you been to Paris?
Yes. I didn't go for this book because I was working on this book in 2021 and late 2021, maybe into 2022. And when I first started, it was still COVID-y, sort of. I mean, it's still kind of COVID-y, but nobody was really traveling a lot, but I've been twice. Love Paris. I think it's probably my favorite European city that I've been to. Really want to go back, but didn't need to go, partly because I've been, but partly because there's so much research. I mean, there's so much I could get from research, everything from photos to, the memoirs that I mentioned to, newspapers, even though I don't read French. There are some English newspapers I can get. So
Have you found that a lot of the places where you have things set have changed a lot over the years?
Like if I look at, pictures, Google Maps or whatever, yes. And that's the other reason that it's really, don't let the IRS hear me say this. Oh, you're recording this, aren't you?
Never mind.
Okay, I really do need to go to Paris because I really do need to see how those streets are and everything, and where she lived on the street that I can't say because there's people who speak French here will know that I am butchering it, but you all know the street I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it because I will butcher my French.
That's fair.
Any other questions? That depends on people like you. Quite honestly, Erica can probably speak to this. As an author, I'm happy to write as many books as my publisher wants me to write in this series, and as many books as the readers and the booksellers, and the librarians want me to write. As many as I can. But here's the interesting thing. So Julia was only in Paris for about 3 years. And this series will be perpetually set, even though the first two books, the first one's set December 1949 because there were specific things happening, and the next one is set January 1950 because there's something specific that happens. But I feel like the rest of them are kind of going to be set in perpetually 1950, 1951 Paris, because I can't really do the series once Julia leaves. I'm doing the same thing for the Philida series. They're always going to be set in 1930s, like between 1930 and 1935. I'm not going to get to a certain date. The Lincoln series, if I ever write any more, those are specific in time because we want the war to be over. But the short answer is I'll write as many as I can. Let me put it that way, as many as I can.
Do you have a clear picture of how you're going to embroil Julia, since she's the side character in each of these murders?
Well, no, only because I have no idea what each book is going to be. So the next book, which comes out a year from now, called A Murder Most French, Julia convinces Tabitha to go with her to a cooking demonstration at the Le Cordon Bleu, which they used to do every afternoon. Julia would go every afternoon and watch this cooking demonstration. It was open to the public, so you didn't have to be a student. So they go, and while they're there, the chef drinks some wine and he literally drops dead from cyanide poisoning. So that's how Julia is involved in that one. Julia is always going to be involved because she's going to be encouraging Tabitha, oh, you should check into this. You should look into this. And she will also help and aid and abet by saying, I'll cook for your grandfather while you go do this, because nice. Tabitha's always like, well, I need to go. No, you go do that. So I think it'll kind of evolve, presumably, hopefully.
No, that sounds legit.
Hopefully. We'll see.
You involved with the cover?
Not really, in the sense that, well, I was the one that came up with the title, which I was really happy about because A, I think it's a really good title, and B, I never come up with good titles. So I can say that because normally my titles are not good and nobody uses them. But because it's, obviously an homage to the actual cookbook, they were trying to do something similar without being too close to the cookbook. But if you see the little murdery chef dude on there, he's my favorite guy. He's going to be on all the covers, and I love him. My murdery chef dude.
It's a great cover.
I love this cover. I love the Mallow and Hall cover too. I think your covers. Oh my God! The minute I saw Mina House, I was like, they nailed that in Istanbul. I think that's a gorgeous.
Istanbul's really pretty.
Oh, did you go on a sea voyage for Atlantic Murder?
I did.
I'm so jealous. I want to do that so badly.
It was a little long.
I wondered, how long was it? Well, how long was it?
So a transit, because my third book, Danger on the Atlantic, is set on a transatlantic cruise, and it's 7 days. And I gotta say, by about day 3, I was like, I could be done.
You could murder someone.
I could have murdered someone
because there's no stops.
You're just on a boat, on a really big boat on the North Atlantic or the North Sea, and I went the same time Jane would have, which was November, and the boat was doing this.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so.
Yeah, now I maybe don't want to do that. I always thought it would be fun because you see that's, like Poirot did a bunch of those. Yeah. And I think besides yours, I know there's other books set on like transatlantic, not the Titanic, obviously, but other ones.
No.
So what was the question? Oh, it was the cover. It was the cover. I don't know how we got there. Oh, because we went to her covers. Yeah. So, yeah, so I didn't really have anything to do with the cover. The brilliant cover designer at Kensington Books did that cover. And my understanding was they had a lot of iterations of it because they didn't want it to look too close to the cookbook cover, but they wanted it to evoke it.
I'm curious, how were there a lot of concerns about the estate, the child estate?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the Julia Child Foundation is very protective of her name, which completely understand. God, I just remember this is being recorded. Yeah. So they are very protective about her name, and there was a lot of. So let me back up. Agatha Christie, we could have had the same concerns, but the estate isn't quite as protective, and protective, I guess is the word, as the Julia Child Foundation is. And so there was question internally whether we wanted to talk to them first and let them know about the book before it came out, or just let them, find it. Well, the decision was made to let them know about it, and it went well. Thank God. They think the book is charming, or I should say the people at the foundation. I can't say the foundation is saying this, but the people at the foundation had no problem with it. They thought it was charming and harmless to her name, and it was fine. So fortunately, yeah, because there have been situations in the recent past where the Julia Child name has been used, and the foundation didn't appreciate the way it was being used. So yeah, there was some concern. And that's one of the reasons that they changed the original idea of Julia solving mysteries to maybe we shouldn't do that, even though I'd already written, part of the book. But I was really happy about that change. Yeah.
So I love about having Julia Child in there. Because I read all the books and I've already said everything we've done. And I can see this the next question I would have is, in any of your series, do you ever think of doing a movie or something on Netflix?
Do I think of it? I think of it all the time. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I would love it. And actually, I already have Tabitha Knight cast, if anybody wants to know.
Yeah.
Does anybody know Rachel Brosnahan? Right.
Oh, she's
She is such a
fabulous.
cute Tabitha.
She would be a great Tabitha.
Now, is anybody watching the Julia series on HBO? The actress playing Julia is amazing. Oh my gosh. And it's a really fun series, and it takes place way after my books. It takes place when she starts doing The French Chef. So it's kind of fictionalized how that happened. Side note, really fun side note. I was at an event in New York related to the Julia Child Foundation and something that they do. And the food stylist for the show, Julia, on HBO was there, and I got to meet her. What a neat job. What a neat job. She's a food stylist. So she was saying that she would send her assistant to go she'd be like, I need 14 chickens and they need to look exactly alike. So her poor assistant would have to go running around New York City or wherever they do it. I don't know where they're filming it, to find the food, but they had to have enough to be in all these different scenes. I could have sat there and talked to her for hours. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So there was a question. Oh yeah, about TV. Well, yes, I'm sure I speak for Erica Ruth too as well. We'd love to have somebody make our anytime.
It's what dreams are made of.
Right. Anybody who knows anybody.
I to read this, and I start reading an author, and then I want to read everything by the author. And then I want to know about the author. And so we're so happy you're here.
Thank you.
Makes it more personal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that, I'm sure I speak for Erica Ruth as well. Music to our ears, because you guys are the reason we write and we can continue to write. So thank you very, very much. Now I really hope you like the book, because there's no guarantee she's going to take it home. She's going to be like, I don't know. She didn't put enough butter on that roasted chicken. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Back there.
I'm an audiobook fan. So how involved do you get in picking the narrator?
Not at all. No, usually the publisher, either the publisher retains the rights and then does the sub rights to the audiobook publisher, and they make all the decision. Or even if I retain the rights and we sell them to an audiobook publisher, usually the audiobook publisher makes all those decisions. I understand that the book narrator for this, Polly Lee, is amazing, but I haven't heard it yet. You're saying yes? Good.
Do you listen to him?
Yeah,
Your own?
sometimes.
Oh.
Well, I do like, it's a really good way for me to review the book when I'm getting ready to write the next one. So I don't have to sit
Fair.
and read it again. But also just because I'm curious, because I know for audiobook lovers, if the narrator doesn't work for them, then the book's not going to work. So you just hope that they have the right, that it works. You don't listen to yours.
It makes me cringe so hard.
Oh, really?
Oh my God.
Oh,
Someone tried to make me once and I think I curled up into a ball.
I got to know who your narrator is, though.
I think it's Sarah Zimmerman. Again, like I didn't even know that I had an audiobook until I went out to Amazon one day and I was like, oh, there's an audiobook of this.
Fabulous. Yes.
So I also heard it's not that get your kickback or something from an audio so much less than a book.
It depends on your contract. It's all dependent on your specific contract, what your advance is, what your royalty split is, who the publisher of the audiobook is. It really depends. Yeah.
About that, do they, when you sign a contract, do they tell you how many books they're going to publish, or do you have some say in it?
It's usually what happens is they'll say how many books they want. And usually it's 2 or 3. They're not going to contract you for a bazillion books out the door. Because they want to see how the books do, which is also good because, if you get a 2-book contract and you do 2 books and they do well, then you hopefully get more money for the next 2. But if you did a contract for 4 books and they did really well, you're still stuck at that same, I say stuck, that's not really a good word, but you're still at that same, because you get an advance against royalties. So it's a flat fee. You get it usually paid when you sign the contract and the other part when you turn the book in. And then every time a copy of the book is sold in whatever format, hardcover, paperback, ebook, you get a piece of that. Once all that adds up to what your advance was, that means you've earned out. And then anything over that is you get paid on that too. And sometimes there's a sliding scale. So what the publisher usually does is when they offer you an advance, generally it's what they think you're going to make on the book, generally. Now, when I say don't usually give you more than 2 or 3 books in a contract, I do know that changes because my dear friend Robin Carr, who wrote Virgin River, she was doing 2 or 3 book contracts. And then when she got really, really big, they started doing 7-book contracts because they wanted to sort of, get that advance where it was and the kind of, you know what I mean? Because every book she'd be making more. So did they want to you know what I'm saying? So there's a benefit to having, maybe only a 2-book contract, because at that point, then you can negotiate for more potentially. So then the next question that you may want to ask, and even if you're not going to ask, I'm going to answer it. How soon, do they tell me when to turn these books in? Yeah, well, see, that usually is when people ask. It's usually a negotiation, like a discussion. And Erica, I know you have a book out about once a year in your series, as I do. So we don't want it to be longer than a year because we don't want you to forget about us. So usually that's part of the negotiation house. And we usually turn the book in a year before it comes out, roughly. So it's all just a matter of negotiation. They don't say, we need you to have this book here by, 9 months from now or else. It's very much a negotiation, a discussion. I mean, I'm assuming that's what your experience has been. Any other questions?
If either of you weren't writers, what would you be doing?
I'd be very unhappy. I have the best book. I have the best job in the world. I never thought I'd be a writer. I went to school and did sales and marketing, got a master's in business, worked in the business world, always wanted to write. When I sold my first book, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I can write. Let's just hope I can keep doing it. I don't know. What would you be doing?
I would go back to teaching English if I had to go back to 9 to 5. I really like teaching, although what I love more is not having a day job and just doing this is what I love more.
It's the best
And
thing.
working for myself is
The best thing.
the best thing.
So bite your tongue. Hopefully that's not going to happen for either of us. Buy our books. Tell your friends. We might be done.
We might be done.
All right. Oh, yep. One more.
Publishers do you go to for it?
So I had written, I don't know, 6 books probably. And then I got my first agent, and she tried to sell a book for me that didn't sell. So she went to the editors who would have acquired that type of book. Nobody wanted it, which is the story of many writers' lives, including mine. And then I wrote another book that she loved, and she ended up selling it to an editor at New American Library, which was part of Penguin Group. So it really depends on how many editors are acquiring the type of book that you're writing, how many you go to, if you will. So it really varies.
So you say, like the first book, you were out there trying to tell your own book.
I was looking for an agent to do that for me because really, yes. And it's just as hard to get an agent as it is to get a publisher. I mean, yeah. Because they only want to take on projects that they are sure they can sell. So, because otherwise it's a waste of their time, you know? Yeah. Yeah. It could be, you know, it depends. Yeah. Oh, that's why I never thought I could be a writer, because it's like being a basketball star, you know? Yeah.
So once you got these, you go back, and you're gonna come forward with the 6 books that didn't go forward?
I didn't do that until later, until indie publishing became something, and the ebooks, because it was a lot easier. So those 6 books are available, you know, as ebooks and actually print books. I never took them to a major publisher because I was busy writing other books anyway. I didn't, and they never, as I mentioned before, you know, the publishers buy I don't think I mentioned this actually. Publishers buy things that they think are going to sell big enough to make it worth their while. So, you know, a lot of the books that I wrote maybe had a smaller audience than the publisher would have expected. So I make them, they're available, you know, anyway now, because I do have an audience for them, just not the type of audience the publisher was looking for at the time. It's very cyclical. There's it's whatever's hot at the moment, and it changes all the time. Right now, you know, Colleen Hoover, which I wish my last name was Hoover. Can I just say that? Colleen Hoover is amazing. And I think it's absolutely fantastic when I go into the airport and there's a whole kiosk of just her books. But it's almost guaranteed that it'll be cyclical, that, you know, 10 years from now, she very likely or very possibly may not be selling the way, it's just the way the business is. So maybe she will be, but, you know, even Stephen King has changed what he's written over the years. Yeah. Well, usually because the books didn't do well enough under the other name. So what happens a lot is the publisher, when they're launching a new series, like my Fill It a Bright series, was the first series I wrote under Cambridge, the Agatha Christie's Housekeeper series. The publisher, if they are particularly, you know, excited about a book, or they really want to, well, they always want a book to do well. So what they might do is they want to brand something, you know, from scratch, kind of. And when they look back at maybe how the Lincoln books did, which were under Gleason, they didn't do so well. So they didn't want that baggage, if you will. So they wanted to create a brand. Plus, these books were different. So that's kind of the reason. A lot of times, it's to create a new brand, to launch something new without the baggage of previous titles.
Did you get to pick your new name?
I did.
Nice.
I almost went with Claire Cambridge, but my agent was like, don't you want to be Colleen? I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea, because I would never answer to Claire or any other name other than Colleen. So why not stick with Colleen?
Fair.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
so. One more question? Anybody? Somebody back here had their hand up over here. Yeah. Oh,
That is it's my real and full name.
it's the book that has been bugging you for a while to write, that you know nobody wants to publish, but you have to write it. It's not marketable. It's not hot. The premise isn't maybe the most exciting premise. That's how I define it. Now, another author might define it differently, but it's the book that just won't leave you alone, even though there probably isn't a big future for it.
I mean, I would define it differently. Mine was Mina House. It was the book that bothered me for a really long time, that I really wanted to write an Agatha Christie style book set in 1920s Egypt. Was always like rattling around in the back of my head. So I sat down and did it.
Well, the good thing is that sometimes the book of your heart is marketable and does get published, and then sometimes it doesn't. So, you know, actually I have a lot of books of my heart that nobody wanted to publish. That's just the way the world works. Thank you so much. You guys were great. Lots of great questions. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
very, very much.
Colleen, Erica, thank you both so much for being here. All of you, thank you so much for being here. We wouldn't have a bookstore without you. I have wonderful news for your imagined adaptation of this book. Rachel Brosnahan was actually born in Milwaukee and lived here till she was 4. Then the family moved to Highland Park.
Okay, who knows her? Who knows her?
It's time to put your money where your mouth.
Thank you. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here.